Honorable Speaker, we must ensure that we discourage our young people from getting into rather unproductive economic activities like gambling and encourage them to get into more productive, economically productive activities other than gambling, Honorable Speaker. And you don't do that by lowering tax. When you lower tax, you make it very easy for them to gamble. And I know the other argument, Honorable Speaker, and I have seen it in the presentations by the industry players, that once you raise the taxes here, people will go and start gambling outside the country online. Honorable Speaker, if governments around the world are able to stop people from using WhatsApp, how difficult is it for a government to stop people from gambling online? It is possible, Honorable Speaker, and you don't need to stop them. Tax them even when they gamble online. At the end of the day, there will be a way that you have to remit money, whether it's through PayPal, whether it's through M-Pesa, whichever means that you use to transmit that money to the company you are gambling with, whether it's a company in the UK, whether it's a company in the US, whether it's a company in South Africa. So long as you're able to remit money, government should be able to institute means and mechanisms through which the person who is remitting the money pays a tax even at the point of remitting. And those are some of the new innovations, Honorable Speaker. I was hoping the Sports Committee would be innovative enough. But I do hope, Honorable Speaker, at the right time, because these tax matters, again, are better handled by the Finance Committee. And I hope even as we get to the next finance bill, we should get to a position where we'll be innovative. The Finance Committee and the National Treasury must begin thinking, how is it that they can also be able to tap into those who are gambling online, so that they either pay as a gamble and they're able to get part of the money even for those who win. So that, Honorable Speaker, the defeatist argument that if we raise our taxes here, people will go and gamble online in companies outside Kenya, then we can be able to get money even from those that are outside Kenya. Honorable Speaker, I said I don't want to dwell too much on this bill because a lot is what we said yesterday on the lottery bill, but I really want to plead with members to help us pass this bill because it is dealing with a known national vice in Kenya now. Gambling, Honorable Speaker, and it's not just the young. I have seen around the country very elderly men and women who spend all their time gambling. And I said, Honorable Speaker, yesterday, our radio stations, especially our vernacular stations, have made it now the norm. For every 2 sentences on a vernacular radio station that you listen to, the third sentence is promoting gambling. Honorable Speaker, I do hope that the measures therein in this bill to even control the advertisements of gambling companies will come to fruition when we pass this bill, so that we don't encourage Kenyans to gamble by bombarding them on TV with advertisements on vernacular radio, and that's how we are roping in even the very elderly, because they are made to believe that the easiest way to make $500,000 shillings is to just text a number to some radio station, and those people are collecting billions. Honorable Speaker, I said yesterday, it is now reported that most of our mainstream media stations are making more money from gambling than from their core business of broadcast or even from advertisements for corporates, Honorable Speaker. We must protect our people from being taken advantage of. Unfortunately, Honorable Speaker, it is not you and me who gamble. Although I know in the last parliament, Honorable Speaker, we had one member, without naming names, who was an addict and he would leave the chamber and run off to some casino somewhere. I have not seen that in this parliament, Honorable Speaker.
You knew one, I knew 3.
I didn't even say from where, Honorable Speaker. I hear somebody saying one from somewhere. You know 3. But unfortunately, it is 3.
I knew 3.
It is 3 in a population probably of 349 members of parliament and about 64 or 67 senators. So in a population of about 500 people, you can count 3 or 4. But if you go to the population outside there in our villages, Honorable Speaker, the most vulnerable people in our society are the ones who are being taken advantage of. is actually immoral, that we are taking money from the poorest of the poor. And because you make it look like you only need 10 shillings, 30 shillings, 50 shillings, it becomes customary that I will try my luck with my 10 shillings today, at lunchtime another 10 shillings, in the evening another 10 shillings, tomorrow I'll up the stakes to 30 shillings, the next day 50 shillings. And you know, they lure them by making them win with their 10 shillings bets. You win 100 shillings, then you spend the 100 shillings betting, hoping that you will now win 1,000 shillings. The day you win 1,000 shillings after spending 3,000 shillings, you win 5,000, you bet that, hoping that you will eventually be the one winning the 500,000 or 1,000,000 shillings that is being promoted on TV. Honorable Speaker, I want to say I particularly support the provisions to also regulate the advertisements of gambling, betting, Honorable Speaker, so that we protect the most vulnerable, not just of our youth, of our elderly, but also of the very poor in our society who are being taken advantage of. And unfortunately, Honorable Speaker, when you look at the people who run these gambling companies, they are extremely filthy rich people, very wealthy people. But they are making more money from the poorest of the poor in our society. Therefore, Honorable Speaker, we have an obligation and a duty to protect our poor people from being taken advantage of, to ensure that we have good laws, that will protect them, that will not make gambling look like it's a very good thing, Honorable Speaker. And as I said, since it is, in fact, I know in some religions, Honorable Speaker, they consider it to be a sin. And that is why I said, even in tax matters, this should be classified as a sin tax. And therefore, we cannot be encouraging reduction of taxes. And that's why I said I completely disagree. And I know Honorable Mashukuru, the Vice Chair, was here. I had indicated to them I disagree with the proposals in their report to reduce that tax. If anything, today we have, I think, excise duty at 12.5% in the last finance bill, which we passed only in July of this year. We had 5% withholding tax. Therefore, you are proposing not even to move from 15, you are proposing a tax cut of about a gross of 17.5 to 13%. Honorable Speaker, not during such hard economic times when we should be looking for avenues to raise every extra shilling. I will therefore be proposing amendments at the right time, Honorable Speaker, in relation to that clause 45 and clause 46 that touch on levies and taxes, Honorable Speaker. With that, I beg to move and request the Deputy Whip, who is also a member of the committee, who was designated by the Chair and the Vice Chair to second, on behalf of the committee to second. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Naomi Wako, proceed.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I rise to support the Leader of Majority in moving the Gambling Control Bill 2023, National Assembly Bill number 70 of 2023, as it has just been read. Mr. Speaker, it is clear that gambling is attracting a lot of attention and also has many people who practice in our country. And that is why Gambling Control Bill 2023 is here to seek and replace the outstanding Betting, Lottery, and Gaming Act of 1960. This was done. The Act of 1960 is long time ago, many, many years ago, and I believe not many people who are here today were born by that time. The bill seeks to institute a comprehensive legislative framework for the regulation gambling in Kenya, with specific emphasis on incorporating safe gambling principles within the sector. Additionally, the bill seeks to establish the Gambling Regulatory Authority, which shall bear the responsibility of licensing, regulating the gambling sector. Mr. Speaker, we have had a lot of challenges, just as I said yesterday with the lottery, that even with gambling, many people have ruined their lives. simply because of wasting their money, anticipating to be rich the following day. And in a way, it has also made people to be lazy because they believe in waking up every morning, doing this, and getting rich without working very hard. And so this particular gambling control bill will help us to put in place all the measures that are needed, legislative framework that will guide and regulate gambling in Kenya. And again, just to have the gambling principles within all the sectors, and again having gambling regulatory authority, whereby all the matters that concerns gambling will come under them, and they'll be able, the authority will be able to regulate, the authority will be able to investigate, the authority will be able to act in case of anything. Honorable Speaker, the Department Committee on Sports and Culture, in its consideration of the bill, noted the inadequacy of the current legal and institutional framework in addressing modern challenges existing within the gambling sector. Additionally, the committee expressed concerns about the organization enforcement on and consumer protection aspects of gambling activities in Kenya. The committee therefore acknowledges the need for comprehensive overhaul for the legal framework relating to gambling in Kenya. Mr. Speaker, those who have been practicing gambling in our country have been exposed in many ways and have not had any protection. Many of them have lost even their properties. Many have even not been given their due rights. And that is why many of the people who have been in gambling have ended up being frustrated fellows, have been moved to depression and all these other things. And many of them keep complaining about the practice and all these other things. And when this bill will be approved, their protection will be assured, and even the people who own the gambling companies will be able to live within that and be able to give the people of our country their due rights. Honorable Speaker, the bill recognizes that gambling is a shared function between the national government and the county government. And it is important for us to know that yes, the policies are made, and it is there for both the national government and also the county government, because most of the people who practice are within our counties and at the grassroots level. And that is why this will help our country, because it provides for the schedule to the Constitution. The bill, therefore, assigns a specific role to the two level governments and proposes concurrent regulatory functions for the national and county governments in gambling activity. Mr. Speaker, the bill also seeks to do the following. Number one, provide framework for the regulation and control of gambling activity. Once we do that, then we have protected the interest of the people who continue doing this and investing in this particular thing. And even if most of us are not for the idea, now that already most of our people, majority of Kenyans are practicing this, and some believe that it is the only way they can earn their living. Honorable Speaker, the only honorable thing that this House can do is to come up with this bill so that they can be well protected. Again, the bill will be, they expressly provide for the gambling activity that shall be legal in Kenya while prohibiting illegal forms of gambling. Others have taken advantage by doing illegal business here, and so this bill will protect those who have invested and those who have registered and have had their license, so that others will not be practicing this illegally. Again, the bill will promote the development of a responsible gambling industry. In the past, some people have been cheating Kenyans, and others have been, conning people in different ways but this bill will bring that to an end. And again, it will minimize the social harm associated with gambling because Kenyans will be given enough education. The last one, the bill will provide for the establishment of mechanism for the resolution of disputes relating to gambling. Again, many people have had conflict, and in order for us to have peaceful coexistence among our people, and also those who are practicing this to enjoy, then we can only put this into practice. Honorable Speaker, in as much as gambling is considered to be demerit good, its regulation brings forth some advantages to Kenya. One of the main highlights of the bill is that it seeks to provide an avenue for the generation of essential revenue for the government. Clause 45 of the bill provides for the payment of gambling tax. And it is on that we have the 15% rate of the gross gambling revenue, and which funds shall be remitted to the Sports, Arts, Social Development Fund, and the net effect of that will of course be positive because through that revenue, many of the people will be able to transform their lives. The artists, the people who are doing sports, young people who are talented in different ways. And in our country today, we have many people who are also negatively affected by drugs because the drug addiction is quite high due to lack of job in our country. And rehabilitation centers will be built. People will be given a lot of counseling. People will be rehabilitated. And maybe we can even come up with a proposal whereby all the people who are rehabilitated can be given some seed money so that they can go and begin a better life, do small businesses here and there so that they can improve their lives. Because of that, we need to support this bill so that it can have that positive impact on our people. And even for those who will be registering and having their license, it is good for them to give back to the society because this is an area where mainly those people who do not have a lot are engaged in because they believe in creating their wealth through this. Then they invest a lot in this. Let even the people who will be licensed give back to the society by going back to the communities, improving their lives, supporting the poor, supporting the vulnerable people, orphans, and even the institutions that take care of vulnerable children in our midst. Mr. Speaker, another key aspect of the bill is that it provides measures to mitigate the harm associated with gambling. These measures include public sensitization, self-exclusion, enforcement against illegal gambling, promotion of responsible gambling, advertising restriction, and criminalization of gambling by young persons. Further, the bill proposes stricter measures to mitigate issues related to gambling addiction. Mr. Speaker, the Department Committee on Sports and Culture have had enough interaction with stakeholders. Submissions have been done. Different ministries, Ministry of Youth Affairs, Ministry of Sports, and all the others have participated, and they have given their views. Mr. Speaker, the committee has considered this, and I take note that gambling.
Give her 1 minute to wind up. Give her 1 minute.
Yes, thank you. Honorable Speaker, I take note that Gambling Control Bill presents comprehensive and modernized approach to the regulation of gambling in Kenya. It aims to balance the economic benefits of the industry. And with those few remarks, I beg to second. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Naomi. Honorable members, I now propose the question that the Gambling Control Bill, National Assembly Bill number 70 of 2023, be now read a second time. Carol Omondi.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker. I'm a member of the committee, so I rise to support the bill. First, by recognizing that it has a very solid policy foundation. I think we have the gambling policy passed in 2022, which, among other things, seeks to balance between the need for a friendly investment climate, but also to establish a very robust regulatory regime for this particular sector by transforming gambling into a social force for social development. And one of the key planks of that policy is how to raise additional revenues, both for national government and the county government. So this particular bill is very timely, and the policy, of 2023 this bill gives life to that particular policy. Mr. Speaker, gambling, like tobacco, alcohol, prostitution, drugs, junk food, and all other demerit goods, tend to present challenges to many governments. Their consumption is generally considered socially unacceptable or undesirable, but at the same time, it is almost impossible to stamp them out completely because of their perceived negative effects to the consumers. Consequently, a balance has to be established as to how to limit their overconsumption or cases of addiction, damage to health, and the various dysfunctional social life they cause, plus also a lot of external costs to third parties. But they also provide a very rich avenue for new emerging and very transnational crimes like tax evasion, money laundering, and financing of terrorism. In Kenya today, Mr. Speaker, the gross revenue for gambling is in excess of $250 million. And this sector is growing year on at 27 to 30%. You can imagine how much money is circulating in it. This particular bill seeks to establish the Gambling Authority of Kenya, the Gambling Appeals Tribunal, and a gambling tax, which, as you have heard, the majority leader would like to propose a higher regime. From our analysis, gambling tax in the region ranges from 15 to 25%, so we'll debate that at the right time. But also, it seeks to generate revenue for what we call good causes. This is culture, sports, arts, recreation, heritage, protection of vulnerable groups such as PWDs, aged orphans, protection, rehabilitation of problem gamblers, environment, climate change, relief, innovation, education, entrepreneurship, libraries, and supporting emergencies. But we also looked at the policy and incorporated certain safety measures that would help create sanity in this sector. For example, we are proposing restriction on gambling advertisement, both to the news companies, but also to the gambling companies, and also the times and the regime of how gambling advertisement should be handled so as to protect children and other vulnerable groups. We are also, in the bill, proposing regulation of online gambling. This is where people gamble on the internet or through use of remote communication. And this is very addictive, but also presents transnational issues on jurisdiction as also, opportunities for money laundering and financing of terrorism. And then we have proposed in the bill very strict deposit limits so that people gamble in small amounts to avoid impulsive gambling. And we have also proposed restriction on use of what are called prediction apps. In fact, we had a small group of very good Kenyans called Gambling Association Society of Kenya, led by a gentleman called Nelson Bwire and his friend, I think, Kipto, who educated us a lot about these prediction apps where they give people a false sense of comfort and you continue gambling very heavily. But I think there are also issues of public awareness, and we have also introduced surety schemes equivalent to what obtains in banking industry, depositors protection, so that those who come to establish gambling businesses here provide security in case they run away, so that those who have won prizes don't lose out. And there are also new provisions that are novel on savings. So if your people are gambling, there'll be an amount of money that will be deducted to be saved for their own personal use at a later date. And my Honorable Chair, I would like to note that there's a lot of work that we still need to do in this particular sector. We have very many challenges when it comes to the gambling sector. Amongst them is the fact that, as I've said, issues of tax evasion, money laundering, and financing of terrorism. But there's also the issue, the requirement that if you want to license somebody, you have to vet, do security checks, and undertake heavy due diligence on their backgrounds. And we have had lapses in enforcement mechanisms so as to curb illegal gambling and ensure effectiveness of self-exclusion measures. This is where a person acknowledges he's an addict, or close members of his family will record that he's an addict to gambling, and then we put him on a program to be excluded from going into casinos and other places. And we also require strong enforcement to do public awareness campaigns, promote responsible gambling behaviors, and protection of the young, vulnerable, and other members of society. Consequently, we are appealing to the Ministry of Interior as the ministry that will be responsible for this particular act to take these measures very seriously so as to protect the public. There's still a bit of work that we need to do, which we were not able to achieve, and hopefully the government side will see it fit to find ways of working on these new areas. One is prohibition of credit facilities for gamblers. There are people who go to Fuliza, borrow money, and quickly M-Pesa it to a gambling pay bill. We think there's scope for regulation here so that those dealing with online lending can be restrained from allowing transfers of money from their facilities to well-known gambling pay bills. We also want to impose restrictions on other activities, but also call upon competition for licenses. In other jurisdictions, you don't just walk in, apply, and pay 1 million shillings. Licenses for gambling are actually advertised, and people compete so that the government can raise additional revenue. I think there'll be need to create some further work on that so that licenses are competed for, gambling licenses, just like we did for Safaricom, Airtel, and the rest. And also, the prediction apps, gambling prediction apps, I think we need to do some work, additional work, and restrict it. But most importantly, we need to anchor the Sports, Arts, and Social Development Fund, where much of this gambling levy will be going into, in an act of parliament. Presently, I think it is established by a regulation, and that is not very solid enough. I think the governmental side should bring a bill to help us deal with those issues. With those remarks, Honorable Speaker, I support.
Thank you. The Honorable Donya Doris, member for Kisii.
Oh, thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I rise to support because, Madam Speaker, I remember I used to bet sometimes back, and when you are waiting to receive the money or not to receive the money, it's sickening. So many people have suffered from stress. Others have borrowed in vain without returning because they feel that if they practice the betting, they will make their lives better, Madam Speaker. When there are regulations in this whole activity, people will tend to do more work that is productive than betting itself. So many people, Madam Speaker, have committed suicide because maybe they've either lost or they've lost the money that they had lended. When you tune on into radio stations, lately there is not much that is discussed, Madam Speaker, apart from the betting. The messaging is very attractive, Madam Speaker, to the people that they believe if they bet with 10 shillings or 5 shillings, they are going to get millions of shillings. They hang on, they even forget to go to their duties, because when they look at the salary that they have of maybe, they will be getting 30,000 in a month, and when they get the sweet information that when you bet in a day with 10 shillings or even 50 shillings, you are going to get 1 million. You can imagine how unproductive a society can be when people rely on this. On the other side, if these rules are not put, Madam Speaker, we will find out that all our generation, when we had this thing of LGBTQ, people were asking, if I'm a member of that LGBTQ, am I going to be given money? Everything is resonating around money and not how one is becoming productive. So I support this, Madam Speaker. When the regulations are put, we have a more productive ground to play within. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The Honorable Member for Yatta, Honorable Basil Robert.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm a member of this committee, and I appreciate the majority leader for bringing this bill to the House. As my friends have said, it's important we look at the cons and the pros of this industry. Gambling is very addictive, Madam Speaker. So many people have committed suicides. Young people have not been able to complete school because of gambling, loss of properties for so many, family separations because of gambling, Madam Speaker. Those are some of the cons that this particular industry brings. When I talk about the pros of the industry, gambling does generate employment to so many young people. It does generate revenue for the country. And Madam Speaker, gambling does bring charitable work, particularly when you talk of corporate social responsibilities that is associated with the operators in this particular industry. Madam Speaker, the reason why I support this particular bill, one of it, in addition to the pros that I've already stated, it terms illegal gambling. Madam Speaker, a lot of illegal gambling has been taking place, particularly the offshore gambling, and Kenya as a country has been losing a lot of money. Number two, Madam Speaker, the reason why I'm supporting the bill, it does protect minors from the effect associated with this particular industry, and that is one of the very solid reasons why I'm behind the people supporting the bill. Madam Speaker, I've noted the majority leader is not in the House, but I wanted to mention to him the reason why we wanted to reduce the taxation from 15% to 13%. One of the simple reasons why gamblers are moving to illegal gambling is because when you put multiple taxation, you discourage the operators and you attract, or you make it attractive for people to do online and offshore gambling, which as a result makes this country lose a lot of money, when at the same time we want to generate money. Madam Speaker, we are also recommending for unified tax to be employed in this particular industry. Some countries have done it and have been able to generate more money because the bottom line of regulating these particular industries is to tame illegal gambling, generate more revenue for the country, as well as protect people who could otherwise be harmed by this particular industry. So, Madam Speaker, with those few remarks, I join my friends in supporting this particular bill and looking forward to ensure that the industry can be so beneficial to the nation. Thank you. I submit.
Thank you. The Honorable Bishop Jackson Kosgei.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. From the onset, I am a member of the committee that deliberated on the same, and I take the floor to support the bill. This, as has been mentioned, is to balance between the negative and the positive impact of this gaming. I once listened to a friend say, this is one thing you cannot put up with, but you cannot do without it. Because of that, there is need for a regulation to regulate the environment within which the same is done. It is being undertaken and practiced by our brothers and sisters, our fathers, our children, our friends. We cannot bury our heads in the sand and pretend that it is not happening. Because of that, the country and nation and government has a duty to protect its own people from such practices while they practice and exercise and enjoy their freedoms. That environment must ensure that the same are protected. Number two, Mr. Speaker, is that we wanted to, in this bill, regulation is necessary so that we can protect the vulnerable in society, which includes children. We also looked at it, and as we went through, being an old act that was enacted in 1960, we felt that we must make the law responsive to the current needs, challenges of our time, including technology. So it is important that this bill be enacted to reveal our practices in the past. The last one of the consideration was about the people who have been captured and made addict to this, that they needed to be assisted. They need an assistant. They need to be helped out of it. Those who have desired to leave the act of gambling, there is got to be a legal environment that provides instruments that will assist and protect families also of the person involved to be able to have a say in managing a person who has reached this stage. We need a law for that. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I support the bill. Thank you.
Kimani Kuria.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker. And from the onset, I would like to thank the Committee on Sports for the good work they have done on this bill. However, Honorable Speaker, as you're aware, as per our standing orders, as the Chair of the Departmental Committee on Finance and National Planning, I did write to the Speaker asking that Clause 46 and Clause 47, because they, Clause 45 and 46, because they are matters on taxation to be handled by the Committee of Finance and National Planning. We are going to have a meeting with stakeholders tomorrow, and thereafter we'll also table our own findings and reports and move amendments accordingly on this particular clauses. Honorable Speaker, there are at least 117 betting and gaming firms operating in Kenya. And most of these, Honorable Speaker, operate on online platforms. Honorable Speaker, the matter of betting and gaming in this country is very hot, is very thorny, and sometimes it's difficult to really have a stand on this particular matter, because some religions, for example, I know Islam actually do ban gaming. We know the side effects gaming has on it being an addictive behavior. Talk about young people across the country who make betting their day-to-day business. So instead of someone going to work, then their work is just to wake up and bet, Honorable Speaker. I have never bet in my life apart from the raffles that I buy maybe for a church function or something. But I've seen what this betting addiction has done to people, Honorable Speaker. However, there are benefits that accrue in this sector. One of them, Honorable Speaker, is one of our biggest sectors that in terms of our revenue collection, Honorable Speaker. A quick look at the numbers for the financial year 22-23, exercise on betting services, we collected 6.64 billion shillings. Withholding tax on winnings from betting and gaming, we collected 8.68 billion shillings, a total of 15.326 billion. That is compared to 11 billion shillings the previous year, which means we can compare how much we collected in 21, 22, and 2023. We actually were able to collect 4 billion shillings more. After the enactment of the Finance Act, where we increased the withholding tax and the excess duty, just for the first quarter of this financial year of 23-24, excise on betting services, we have collected 3.3 billion shillings, withholding on tax on betting 3.3 billion shillings, a total of 6.56 billion shillings. So you can see, by the end, if this projection continues for the rest of the year, if those taxes are not even altered as they are, we are likely to collect around 24 billion shillings, which is 10 billion shillings more than what we collected last financial year, Honorable Speaker. So the betting sector, therefore, remains very, very critical in terms of revenues for this country. that we really need in terms of moving our country forward and making sure that we rely on our own resources rather than having to go and borrow, Honorable Speaker. However, there is need to relook at some of these particular taxes and how they're administered and see how we can reduce the cost of tax administration, but consequently, but effectively raise more revenues. Because if you look, for example, excess duty on gaming is at 7.5%. Then, of course, the companies pay their corporation tax out of their profit at 30%. There's a 20% withholding tax on winnings. And then the betting tax is being proposed at 15%. The gambling tax, again, a new tax at 15%. And then you add VAT and you add payee. And that is why the Committee on Sports were attempting to come up to propose that there be a gross game revenue where we have one flat rate for this gaming sector. So that would consequently, first of all, leave more money with the pandas, therefore making sure that the chances of winnings actually get to increase, and increase in tax revenues, because now we have a simplified tax process. But at the same time, Honorable Speaker, making sure that the cost of administering those particular taxes for the players is actually getting reduced. But Honorable Speaker, I would not want to preempt the decision that the committee is going to make after its deliberation. So these are some of the options that we are looking at and deliberating on, Honorable Speaker. We tabled the national tax policy last week, Honorable Speaker. We hope that's going to come to debate before we go on recess. It's actually on the order paper of this afternoon. I don't know, but I doubt if we'll be able to get to that order, where we're saying that we need to have a more predictive tax environment, where a business that comes and sets up here in Kenya can ascertain for a fact that within an X amount of time, then these particular taxes are not likely to change. Because if we keep changing, Honorable Speaker, it has a very adverse effects on our investors, and which could even mean that some of them relocating to other countries and us losing on foreign domestic investment, Honorable Speaker. So we're hoping that we have a very robust conversation around this area. So the import now of this particular tax, that's why it has to be looked on very, very keenly, so that we do not stand a chance. Because, Honorable Speaker, the gaming sector has greatly improved. In many years ago, we used to have gaming on horse races, on car races. They were physical, you had to be physically there. But with the migration of the presence of online platforms and even a presence of digital payment methods like digital currencies, bitcoins and cryptocurrencies and all that, that means that we could, if we make the environment too unconducive for business, that means that these particular entities have either an option of relocating to a different country, as I said, or just operating as a purely online platform and getting away from the payment systems, because bank transactions and M-Pesa transactions have a paper trail. But if you talk about those other digital payments like bitcoins and cryptos, which are becoming very, very frequently used, especially by Kenyans, Honorable Speaker, then we would have lost money in this entire sector, Honorable Speaker. But most importantly is the morality also, and this will be my clarion call to the players in these sectors. The morality in which they're doing business, them making sure that they try to stem out this case of addiction, some of this money as proposed in the bill being reinforced to make sure that it goes to, especially to sporting activities, so that we're not just betting for the sake of it, but that betting can actually be used to grow our sports sector. So that you're not just putting bets on the game between Manchester United and that bad team called Arsenal, but we have betting on our local football and volleyball teams, Honorable Speaker, and that would create enthusiasm in these particular sports and games, and make sure that our young people are engaged, make sure these talents are scouted early, Honorable Speaker. So the ring-fencing of this to be used now for those particular important activities, Honorable Speaker, would be very, very beneficial to this country, Honorable Speaker. Those will be my humble submissions. I thank you, Honorable Speaker.
The Honorable Member of Parliament for Mandera West.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker, for giving me this opportunity. I also stand to support and also clear some issues that has been discussed here. As far as gambling is concerned, it was raised here by one of the speakers that some Islamic countries have made these laws and making a lot of money out of it. I want to clear the air by saying that Islamically, gambling is illegal, is haram, is not allowed. So whoever is doing it, whichever government is doing it as its government, but it should not be taken as having been allowed Islamically. On the other hand, gambling is a continuous thing all over the world. Even in this country, there are a lot of people who are gambling day in, day out. And some of them are gambling at the expense of their own family's survival. You see people stealing money, borrowing money to go and gamble so as to get rich in a few seconds or in a few minutes or in an hour or so. But ultimately, what normally happens is that the person loses the money, which he or she might have stolen or might have borrowed, and or maybe it could be the little money that could have fed his family, his children that day, and then the person gets frustrated, he gets a mental breakdown, and ultimately, you see the person walking on the streets and collecting rubbish just because he got involved in an illegal, haram thing that is not allowed anywhere in this world. For this to be, I think, stopped, the government of Kenya should tax it very heavily. Instead of looking for, instead of taxing, put it very heavily on fuel and other things, these are the sort of things that need to be taxed. Taxed so heavily to an extent of maybe 30–40%, and so that many of the people will be out of the market, the gaming will reduce. Of course, it will never end. There are people who are so much addicted to it, and they will continue doing it. But in that way, it will reduce, the numbers will reduce, so the numbers of Kenyans who are negatively affected because of so much involved in gambling will reduce drastically, and hence we shall have more healthy persons on our streets who are able to support their families with other ways and means. Thank you so much. With that, I support.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker. Allow me also to add my voice on this extremely important bill. Honorable Speaker, let me start by saying that it is difficult to entirely regulate gambling, but I've seen different jurisdictions, different countries, and now they have tried to do to work with regulating gambling. For instance, I've looked at the US. The US has a license that is given to all the gambling shops, and they make sure that they are strictly adhered to, that no one under the age of 18 is allowed to gamble. It is the same scenario in the UK. Unfortunately, back home, it is a very, very dire situation. And I'll give an example of my constituency recently when I visited with the PS Interior, Raymond Omolo, Dr. Raymond Omolo. And women came and demanded that within the shops there are gambling machines. And the young men and women every single day wake up in the morning to go to the centers to gamble. Such kind of gambling is what is killing a generation. Honorable Speaker, we have the responsibility as honorable members to make sure that we have a country that produces young people, women and men of substance in society that do not believe that there are shortcuts in making it in life. One of the easiest ways that our people have been deceived that you can quickly get some money is to gamble. It has totally killed families. People have gone into depression, and it becomes an addiction. Actually, there's a disease called gambling addiction. And when you don't gamble, you feel like, you feel the depression that one gets when you are fighting alcoholism. It is a similar problem. And if we do not get rid of it, we will have a problem. In fact, we should go further to make sure that strict penalties are given to people who allow underage to gamble. Society must be shaped in accordance to living morally, and it will be unfortunate if this House do not provide such legislation. So I really want to laud the Committee on Sports for coming up with such strict legislation and making sure that gambling does not exist within this country, and if they do, then we make sure that we have extremely strict laws to disallow the abuse of gambling. It should also be, there should also be time on what time and certificates are given and what time gambling can be played. There are those ones that we can't regulate easily, that we also must provide serious legislation like online gambling that happens a lot, and so that it is not misconstrued. Gambling is a resource and a revenue earner to the country. Honorable Speaker, I just looked how much it generates in the US economy, and it's mind-boggling, $329 billion annually, but only because there are restrictions. In fact, there are like cities that purposely are gambling destinations like Los Angeles. In Kenya, we must make sure that it is prudent, it becomes neat, so that not every kiosk in the village is allowed as a shop for gambling. Young people have fights with their parents, they want to sell land because they want to go and gamble. You find women who are married trying to go and gamble. You find even church ministers going to gamble, or many people in society trying to make quick bucks.